I'm Corinne Schaefer, and welcome to Create Outside the Box. We are starting off the new year with a look back at some of our past conversations that define what it means to be creating outside the box. Whether it's breaking out of a conforming structure, redefining what it means to be an artist, trusting your intuition, or just finding inspiration in the everyday, we hope that this look back will help you look forward as we start the new year. Dancer, singer, and actor, Leroy Boone. I don't think that artists think that everything should be shiny and perfect, but I do think that artists, because they tend to be visionary, that we're hopeful. It's not that we think things are perfect all the time, but we strive to see where the world can be, and we're optimistic that we can bring it there. So maybe he was
For sure.
catching on to the optimism of no, I want to strive to make something beautiful. And that's not about things being perfect all the time, but it is about having hope. And I think I think that's what people need. But anyway, how did you originally get into ballet? Because your parents are not ballet dancers. So what brought you into ballet, and what do you love about ballet?
I think that was very much my trying to find my own voice in the performing arts. And I don't know, there was something about dancing that felt very necessary to me. I needed to express myself with my body from a very early age. I can't really put my finger on it. It came as something that was quite obvious again. My godfather was a dancer with the Harlem Dance Theater of Harlem in New York. And I always had this sort of image of professional male ballet dancer. So that was sort of like a distant example, a distant figure of what it could be. And yeah, I don't really know what it was. But then as I kept going, there was something about striving for an ideal against this sort of continuous research of perfection and perfecting yourself and making yourself, a better human in a way, trying to achieve this ideal that is the perfect ballet technique, the perfect ballet body, this perfect sort of unattainable shape that you can be in if you work hard enough at ballet. So I think that's what kept me going, is that there was an objective that you could fulfill if you worked hard enough. There were very clear rules to the game, and so I think it kind of gave me a shape for that hope and for that aspiration to perfection that I have, and that I think a lot of artists have. So I think that's what kept me going with ballet, and that's what inspired me from the beginning on. And I think that's also, in a funny way, that's also what makes me distance myself from it now. The fact that it's this very finite ideal. There isn't very much room for personality, creativity within the strict boundaries of ballet. And I think there's a part of me who finds that that rigor and the demands of ballet technique a little bit too high a price to pay in my own life and for my own body. But there's also something about the restraints of having to be this clean and having to be, when you dance when you dance ballet, it has to be a certain way, it has to be clean, it has to, tick all the boxes, and it's very contriving to me. It's turned out to be very contriving to me as I progressed.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we both come from classical art backgrounds, ballet, opera. And as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, because in the beginning, it's because it's so clear in what it's expecting of you. There is like a path that you need to follow. There are boxes you need to check. So that structure in the beginning is helpful because it serves as kind of this roadmap of things that you can achieve. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, that's great. And it's interesting to me because I do think that there's part of artists where we don't ever stop challenging ourselves. So I'm not going to say that challenging yourself or striving is a bad thing. But what becomes a bad thing is the quest for perfection. And how do we separate the quest for perfection with just, quality and the exploration of the wonders of what our bodies can do? Mm-hmm. And that can be the dangerous thing. It's like trying to be perfect, trying to cram yourself into this little box. No, but like, how do we still keep the quality and the exceptionalism of what we do to high standards? And that, I think, is what's so challenging. And then also feeling like you were saying, there's a lack of exploration and creativity then because it's only one way, or it's only for whoever you're working for. They might also have a specific vision of what's right and wrong. And you kind of feel like, well, wait a second, I'm losing myself and my own creative voice in striving to be the definition of what this perfection is.
I feel like a lot of that comes to how you teach these classical forms and how you encourage students and young and people, young or old, that come to these art forms, how you encourage them to look for their own voice and how to make it work for their own bodies, and especially for ballet. And I'm guessing from the upper perspective, it's probably kind of the same. The teachers in big institutions have these quotas to fill in a way, and have these very specific ideals they reach for, and this very specific image for their institution they look for. And so there's a culture of pass or discard that is a little bit entertained there. And I think I'm sure there are ways to achieve the same ideals of quality and of high technical education, while keeping an eye on nourishing students, nourishing especially young people who are still forming their personalities and forming their taste and forming their their ideas and their ideals, and making sure you encourage them to look outside the box as well as within the confines of the technique you are teaching them, and encouraging them to see that even if you don't have all the box checked within the institution, there are so many things that you can bring in to keep being rich and juicy as an artist.
Singer and photographer Anastasia Zisman. No one does a perfect performance, like ever, right? So if you're on stage and you're thinking about the past, you're thinking about, some mistake that you made, you're going to slip up again because you're not in the present. And that's the same thing with life.
Absolutely.
Well, too much in the past that prohibits you from moving forward. And also when you're on stage, if you're thinking too far, like, oh gosh, this is coming up, I need to do this. Again, you're going to screw up the present.
Absolutely.
We're projecting things. Oh gosh, this may happen. Well, wow, that's a waste of energy because we don't have control over that. All you can do is be in the moment. And what I love so much about performing, and I guess my own life too, is you can have, like you said, there is a structure. It's not like we're free falling through a stage production or life, but within that structure, being in the moment, that's when you have like the surprises of
exactly.
Like, oh, this person's reacting this way. And it becomes like this really fun improvisation. And I guess life is just one big,
it's like with life, choices. In life, it holds choices. We have choices. Probably not, but we still have choices,
Exactly.
And then it makes you like, fill it in with anything what you want.
So, on the topic of intuition, how do you think intuition and creativity are linked?
I think it's kind of the same spot in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's the same part of the machine, if I can call it like this. It's how you call it, like a speed box in a car, probably. Or how you call the box when you choose the speed? What's the name of it?
The gears, the different gears.
Gears, yes, gears. Yeah, it's like a gears. Yes, it's like it's the same mechanism. It has different numbers, layers. Yeah, how you call them, and it's the same in the body. And when you understand that it's this works the same, or it's linked to each other, then you stop seeing it like different things. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I think they
Like in
I
a car.
agree.
It's like driving a car. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I agree. I think that they kind of live in the same place. And I think the more you trust yourself, the more creativity there will be. And it's not something that you have to work at, just like intuition isn't something that you have to work at. It actually is very organic.
It exists some kind of exercises how you, of course it exists something that you, how can you get more intuition or feel it more inside you, or concentration, you know. But most of the time I think you just live with it, you know, and everyone has it.
Yeah, I think everyone has it. And I think that for me, at least, sometimes like if I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I need to come up with something, I need to come up with something good, that's too much pressure. And for me, the ideas actually come out of living. So the minute I, leave my apartment and take a walk in nature, or go get a cup of coffee, or go speak with a good friend, then 2 hours later, that idea is just there. It's not forced, because it's about trusting yourself, which intuition is also about trusting yourself.
And is what you said. Yeah, you go and do something that brings you pleasure, and something that fits to your nature, your own nature. It's like filling a gas tank. So intuition sometimes needs it, or creativity needs it. You cannot just pull constantly from the resources what you have. We don't have, not all of us has so much resources, and not so much energy left sometimes. And then you need to go somewhere, get this amusement, if I can call it, like happiness, and then you can bring it into the work. Then it's interesting, and then it works for other people.
Yeah. Artist Asia Jung.
I notice often that people just really are very, very short with art. It's like you either like it or you don't have anything to say. And that I think is not really a great way to develop more art and to communicate. We communicate with language. It is like that. It is a funny thing how little problems people in America have to stretch the subject food, or where do you go for vacation, or for how much is your rent or your mortgage, or these practical things. There's a lot of exchange and a lot of words and a lot of details, but these things in between the lines when you talk about art, that is not the thing.
I think sometimes people feel more at ease talking about practical things where there's clear answers. And with art, where you're getting into things that can be subjective, meaning one person might see one thing and one person might see another thing. One person might connect to one work, another person might not and connect to something else. And I think people sometimes feel intimidated by art, and they're afraid of saying the wrong thing or being wrong or looking stupid. So they never engage in the conversation because they're just so afraid of looking stupid and looking badly in front of other people or their peers. It's hard because you can't say everything is art, or maybe you can. People will have different opinions about that. But I think that there should be a way to let people know that no matter who you are, you can enjoy art and you can talk about art, and there isn't necessarily always a right or wrong when you're having that conversation.
That is right. And the best way to get there is, of course, to engage people in art at all, right? To do something together, start at some place and get everybody going. And that would be wonderful. And therefore, you got to cut out the idea of talent and greatness, the great artist and the real artist. That is something I think I never heard in Europe, somebody is a real artist and the other, what are the others?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and
funny.
People have imposter syndrome. People feel like I am an artist, but maybe I'm not, because am I only an artist when I make this much money? Am I only an artist if my artwork shows at these museums? And I just think sometimes when you're valuing yourself in this kind of like checklist of like, it's only art if, and it's so dependent on, I hate to say it, financial success a lot of times, or how many people like your works. And the thing is that historically, if we look back at a lot of artists who are popular, Van Gogh was not a millionaire and Van Gogh was not super popular during most of his life. But even, someone on the street knows who Van Gogh is now. So how do we really rate, what a successful artist looks like or what successful art looks like? Because sometimes you need time and context. Illustrator Chelsea Hill. How do you decide on your subjects? Like, you've got your New Yorkers. How do you decide on what stories to tell?
I think it just depends on what's going on in my life. The Pigeon actually was based off like a really terrible arts teacher I had. And so it was when I first moved to New York, it was just kind of what that relationship dynamic made me feel like. And so like, I'm like the little mute character, or at least that mute character represents where I was then. And she doesn't talk and the pigeon's just nasty. And it's just trying to take humor from like an unpleasant situation and like put a funny spin on it. And also back then I loved pigeons. Like when I first moved to the city, I don't remember seeing them in Nebraska. I'm sure we had them, but that was like, I noticed them everywhere. I'm like, there's so many pigeons in the city. So that's why that became like the subject matter. And then taking the personality of that terrible teacher and putting it in a really bitchy pigeon. And it's super simple and funny. And they take like 5 minutes to draw. And it's to this day, my most asked about work of art, like the collective series. Absolutely.
Wow.
That's hilarious. Haven't done too much of him lately. And then what was the other series? New Yorkers. Yes. Just the vibrancy, different personalities, characters that I see. My first series I did 4 years ago that actually kind of got me a little bit of traction was a 100-day New Yorker challenge. So every day I drew a different type of New Yorker with 6 funny facts. And it was like Times Square Elmo, just things that you would never see in Nebraska. Just like an old lady with a cart, like trying to go down the subway, just very New York specific things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it just depends on where I'm working, like what I'm seeing every day. That tends to like influence what I create and what subject matters I draw for,
So life inspiring art.
Yes, always. It always has to draw from some type of personal connection.
Costume and scenic designer, Lucas Vassman. You have all of these different projects that you're doing. How do you keep yourself inspired? What inspires you?
My environment. I find inspiration in everything that's around me. I said that in the beginning, like shout out to all the lighting designers. Light is my biggest inspiration. I'm walking through or I'm driving the bike through the city sometimes and just, you know how beautiful New York is. And seeing different facades, like houses that are from the 1890s or the 1920s next to a building that's from 2010, and how the reflection of the glass facade of the new building reflects on that older facade of the older building. And maybe that building has a window too, and it reflects light to me. Those moments are everything. It's a very funny thing. I live across like a parallel street to my street here in Holland, has a place that is such a big scene in the new West Side Story movie. And I've been there last year with my friend Oscar, who's also a scenic designer. He showed me this neighborhood and we went to corner and I said, wow, this looks like, this is my next scenic design for Les Mis. This looks phenomenal. This facade looks, or this facade, or this house looks beautiful. And with costumes, people really, I take, it's a weird thing sometimes, because sometimes I'm looking back to people and I take photos of like a coat of a woman, and when I walk behind them or past them on the train, and I see, wow, this is a coat. I love the texture. I have to take a picture of this. And so I'm like always like, this is me basically going through the world and taking photos all the time to take inspiration from other people, other things, but basically about my environment. Real life is the best inspiration.
Dancer, performer, and educator Hank Smith. I want to start with architecture school and studying engineering. Now, do you use your engineering brain when you're approaching artistic projects? Are you using like the strategy and design and problem solving aspects of that?
Very good point, because I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of how am I wired, right? And I think when I think about it, I love putting things together. I always love it, whether it's a party, where it's a tap routine, is structuring things, putting stuff together. My basis as a performer was in the art of mime. I was a mime for a while. And I was going out with someone who's related to her brother. No, it's a friend of mine. Her brother was an architect. And I remember meeting him. Now, this is in the 70s when I wasn't doing architecture, I was performing as a mime. And I was talking to him and saying, well, I wanted to be an architect, but now I'm a mime, which has got nothing to do with that. And he says, no, I disagree. And I said, how do you disagree? Well, an architect, there's an empty space and fills that space with a structure, sees something and creates something. He says, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
When you're doing, put it together. So I think that frame of mind, in terms of engineering or figuring things out. I was always good in calculus and algebra, because there it was. I think that does come to play in terms of, I love editing things, which you can appreciate. How do you put it together? So I think that's got something, it's a bit of a connection there.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Create Outside the Box. Please subscribe, rate, and share our podcast. You can listen to Create Outside the Box on Spotify, Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Check us out on our Creative Operations YouTube channel, where you can subscribe to watch our interviews. You can find and follow Creative Operations on our Facebook page and on Instagram at @CO_Creative Operations. For more information about Creative Operations, please visit www.creative-operations.org.